Clara's hands wouldn't stop shaking as she folded the last of Samuel's shirts. 8 months in the ground, and his clothes still smelled like sawdust and pine. She pressed the fabric to her face, breathed deep, and let herself have 10 seconds of grief. 10 seconds. That was all she could afford. Behind her, 5 children sat silent at the empty table. No supper tonight, no firewood for tomorrow. And the landlord's final notice burned in her apron pocket like a lit match. 15 days until Christmas. 15 days until they'd be thrown into the snow. If you're enjoying Clara's story, please subscribe to our channel and follow her journey to the very end. Drop a comment telling us which city you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. Now let's continue. Clara waited until the children were asleep before she unfolded the newspaper. The kerosene lamp flickered, casting shadows across the cramped room. 5 bodies huddled together on the single mattress they shared. Tommy's arm wrapped protective around little Lucy. Ben curled into himself, like he was trying to disappear. Maggie's hand clutching Will's sleeve even in sleep. Clara spread the paper flat on the table and found the advertisement again. She'd read it 40 times already, memorized every word, but she needed to see it one more time before she did something that couldn't be undone. Ranch manager needed. Room and board provided. Family welcome. Reply to J. McAllister, Crooked Creek Ranch, Kansas Territory. Family welcome. 2 words that had stopped her heart when she first saw them. Every other advertisement she'd answered in the past 3 months had the same requirement. Single woman preferred. No children, must be willing to relocate immediately and alone. Alone. As if she could peel her children off her body like a coat she no longer needed. Clara touched the paper, traced the letters with her fingertip. She'd already written the response. It sat folded in her other pocket, addressed and stamped with the last 30 cents she had to her name. She'd told him the truth. Most of it. Mr. McAllister. I am Clara Whitmore, widow, with 5 children, ages 3 to 13. I have experience managing accounts, inventory, and household operations. My children are hard-working and will not be a burden. We require only shelter and honest work. She hadn't mentioned that her husband had been dead 8 months. Hadn't mentioned that she'd sold everything, the furniture, the tools, Samuel's beloved woodworking equipment, just to keep food on the table. Hadn't mentioned that she'd been turned away from every job in town because no one wanted to hire a woman with 5 mouths attached. And she certainly hadn't mentioned what she'd discovered in the ledgers at Crawford's bank. The numbers that didn't add up. The interest rates that seemed to grow like weeds. The foreclosures that happened just a little too conveniently, always benefiting the same man. She'd kept that knowledge locked in her chest like a loaded gun. Dangerous to hold, more dangerous to use. Clara folded the newspaper and slipped it under the mattress with the others. Tomorrow she'd mail the letter. Tomorrow she'd bet everything on a stranger's 2 words. Family welcome. God help them all. 3 weeks later, the reply came. Clara's hands trembled as she tore open the envelope. The children crowded around her, even Lucy, reaching up from Clara's hip to touch the paper. "What's it say, Mama?" Tommy asked. At 13, he'd become the man of the house in the worst possible way, old before his time, shoulders bowed under weight no boy should carry. Did he write back? Clara scanned the letter. Short, direct. A man who didn't waste words. Mrs. Whitmore, the position is yours if you want it. Stage arrives Tuesdays and Fridays in Millbrook. Ranch is 4 miles north. Send word when to expect you. J. McAllister. Well, Ben pressed. Her sensitive boy always watching, always worried. Mama, your face went white. Is it bad news? Clara looked at her children. Tommy trying to read over her shoulder. Ben chewing his lip raw. Maggie gripping Will's hand so tight the little boy winced. Lucy playing with Clara's collar, oblivious. Pack your things, Clara said. Her voice didn't shake. She wouldn't let it. We're going to Kansas. The stage ride took 4 days. 4 days of frozen roads, cramped quarters, and children who asked the same question in different ways. "What if he don't like us?" Will asked on the first day, pressing his nose to the frost-covered window. "What if the ranch is worse than here?" Tommy muttered on the second day, arms crossed, jaw tight. "What if there's no room for all of us?" Ben whispered on the third day, quiet enough that only Clara heard. Maggie said nothing. She just held Lucy and watched her mother's face for cracks. Clara answered them all the same way. "Then we'll figure it out. That's what Whitmores do." But on the fourth day, when the stage rolled into Millbrook and Clara saw the town through the dirty window, her heart sank. Small, tired. The kind of place that had seen better days and didn't expect to see them again. Buildings slouched against each other like drunks holding each other up. Snow piled in dirty drifts against wooden sidewalks. A handful of people moved through the main street, bundled against the cold heads down. "This is it." Tommy's voice dripped with disappointment. "This is where we're gonna live." "The ranch is outside town," Clara said. 4 miles north." 4 miles of what? Frozen nothing. "Thomas?" Clara's voice sharpened. "Enough." The stage lurched to a stop. The driver called out, and Clara gathered her children like a hen gathering chicks. Lucy went to her hip. Will grabbed her skirt. Maggie took Ben's hand. Tommy hefted their single trunk, everything they owned packed tight. They stepped out into the cold. A man stood waiting by a wagon. Tall, thin, worn down in a way that had nothing to do with age. His coat was patched at the elbows, his boots cracked from use. A beard covered his jaw, not trimmed, not neat. And his eyes, brown deep set, shadowed, fixed on Clara with an expression she couldn't read. Then his gaze moved to the children. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. His jaw tightened. Clara's stomach dropped. He hadn't believed her. When she'd written 5 children, he'd thought she was exaggerating. Or lying. Or maybe he just hadn't pictured what 5 children actually looked like, standing in a row, looking up at him with hunger in their eyes. "Mrs. Whitmore." His voice was rough, like he didn't use it often. "Mr. McAllister." Clara lifted her chin. "These are my children. Thomas, Benjamin, Margaret, William, and Lucy, as I wrote in my letter." A long pause. The wind cut through Clara's thin coat. Lucy whimpered and buried her face in Clara's neck. "You said 5. McAllister's voice was flat. "I didn't figure on..." "On what?" Clara's voice hardened. "On them being real, on them having faces." His eyes snapped to hers. Something flickered there, surprise maybe, or respect. "I figured on 2, he said finally. "Maybe 3. Little ones easy to manage." He looked at Tommy, who stood with his shoulders squared, fists clenched, ready to fight. "That one's near grown." "He's 13. He works harder than most men." "Didn't say he didn't." They stared at each other. The wind howled. The horses stamped and blew steam. Then McAllister turned and walked to the wagon. "Get in," he said over his shoulder. "It's a long ride and the cold's getting worse." Clara didn't move. "Mr. McAllister..." He stopped. "If you've changed your mind, say it now. I won't drag my children 4 miles into nowhere just to be turned away." He turned back. Looked at her, really looked, not at the children, not at the trunk, just at her. A woman with nothing left but pride and 5 small reasons to keep breathing. "I haven't changed my mind," he said. "Have you?" Clara gathered her children and climbed into the wagon. The ranch was worse than she'd imagined. The house sagged in the middle like something had stepped on it. The barn listed to one side, half its roof covered with canvas instead of shingles. Fences leaned at drunken angles. A windmill creaked with every gust, one blade missing entirely. And everywhere, the silence of a place that had given up. Tommy spoke first. "Mama, this place is worse than ours was." "Hush." Clara kept her voice steady. "It's shelter. It's 4 walls and a roof." "Half a roof," Ben whispered. McAllister pulled the wagon to a stop and climbed down without looking at them. "I'll bring your trunk inside. House is warm enough. I've been keeping the fire up." He walked away before Clara could respond. She sat there a moment, children pressed against her, and let herself feel the weight of what she'd done. She'd taken 5 children across 4 states to live with a stranger on a dying ranch in the middle of Kansas winter. Samuel's voice echoed in her memory. "Clara, you're the bravest person I ever knew. Brave and stubborn and just a little bit crazy." "Mama," Maggie tugged her sleeve. "Are we staying?" Clara looked at her daughter. 8 years old, going on 40. Little mother to her siblings' worry carved permanent into her young face. "We're staying," Clara said. "Now let's go see our new home." The inside of the house was better than the outside, barely. One main room served as kitchen dining area and living space. A fire burned in a stone hearth, throwing heat and shadows. A small bedroom opened off one side, McAllister's Clara assumed. A ladder led to a loft above. "Children can sleep up there," McAllister said. He stood by the fire, not looking at them. "It's warm. Heat rises." "And Mrs. Whitmore?" The question came from Tommy Sharp with accusation. "Where's she supposed to sleep?" McAllister's jaw tightened. "I'll sleep in the barn." "In this cold, you'll freeze." "Done it before. I'll manage." Clara set Lucy down and stepped forward. "Mr. McAllister, we need to talk. Children, go explore the loft. Carefully." "But Mama?" Tommy started. "Now, Thomas." Something in her voice allowed no argument. Tommy gathered his siblings and herded them toward the ladder, shooting dark looks over his shoulder at McAllister. When the children were up and out of earshot, Clara faced the man who held their futures in his cracked, work-worn hands. "You didn't expect 5, she said. "And you certainly didn't expect them to need feeding through a Kansas winter." "No, ma'am, I didn't." "So why'd you let us come?" McAllister was quiet for a long moment. The fire crackled. Above them, children's footsteps creaked across the loft floor. "I needed help," he said finally. "Ranch is failing. Been failing for 2 years. I thought maybe someone with business sense could see something I couldn't, find a way out. And you thought a woman could do that." His eyes met hers. "My mama ran a ranch by herself for 6 years after my pa died. She had more business sense than any man I ever met. So yeah, I thought a woman could do that." Clara felt something shift in her chest. A crack in the wall she'd built. "There's more," she said. "Something you're not saying." McAllister's mouth twisted. Not quite a smile. "You're sharp." "I've had to be." "What aren't you telling me?" He walked to the table, picked up a piece of paper, and handed it to her. Clara recognized the type immediately. She'd seen enough of them in the past 8 months. Foreclosure notice. 15 days. "Bank's taking the ranch," McAllister said. "Christmas Day, if I can't pay what I owe. I figured if someone was going to be here to help, maybe we could find a way. Long shot, but I'm out of short ones." Clara stared at the paper. The numbers swam before her eyes. Principal interest fees. She stopped. Read again. Something cold settled in her stomach. "Who holds your note?" she asked. "Which bank?" "Crawford Trust and Savings. Only bank in Millbrook. Man named Silas Crawford." Clara's hand trembled. She pressed it flat against the table to hide it. "Mrs. Whitmore, you all right?" She looked up at McAllister. At this broken man on his broken ranch 15 days from losing everything, and she realized that God in his mysterious way had brought her exactly where she needed to be. "I know that name," she said slowly. "Silas Crawford. He held my husband's note too, before Samuel died." "Small world." "No." Clara's voice hardened. "Not small. Designed. Mr. McAllister, may I see your ledgers, all of them, every piece of paper related to your debt?" He frowned. Why? Because I think you've been cheated, and I think I can prove it. They worked through the night. Clara spread papers across the table while McAllister sat across from her watching her trace numbers with her finger muttering calculations under her breath. The children slept above them, exhausted from travel. Lucy had cried for an hour before finally giving in. Will had asked 4 times if they could go home before remembering they didn't have one. Tommy had glared at McAllister until Clara ordered him to bed. Now in the quiet, with only firelight and desperation for company, Clara saw what she'd suspected. Here. She pointed to a line in the ledger. And here. And here. McAllister leaned forward. What am I looking at? Fees. Administrative fees, processing fees, late payment fees. Do you remember agreeing to these? I don't. I signed what they told me to sign. I'm not much for reading the fine print. These fees don't exist. Clara's voice was flat. I worked in my father's general store for 15 years. I know what legitimate banking documents look like. These, she tapped the paper, these are invented. Someone's been adding charges that were never in your original agreement. McAllister's face went pale. You're saying Crawford's been stealing from me. I'm saying someone at that bank has been inflating your debt. Whether it's Crawford himself or someone working for him, I can't say. But the numbers are clear. You don't owe what they say you owe. How much have they added? Clara did the calculation one more time. Near as I can figure, about $200 in false charges. Maybe more. $200. In Kansas territory, that was the difference between survival and ruin. McAllister stood up abruptly. His chair scraped against the floor. He walked to the window and stood there, hands braced against the frame, staring out at nothing. 2 years, he said quietly. 2 years I've been killing myself trying to pay a debt that wasn't real. 2 years of selling cattle. I couldn't afford to sell. Letting hands go that I needed eating scraps so I could make payments that shouldn't have existed. Mr. McAllister. Jesse. His voice cracked. If you're going to tell me I've been a fool for 2 years, you might as well use my name. Jesse. Clara approached him carefully, like she was approaching a wounded animal. You weren't a fool. You were trusting. There's a difference. Is there? He turned. His eyes were bright with something: anger, grief, shame. My mama would have seen it. She would have looked at those papers and known something was wrong. But I just signed, just paid, just kept hoping things would get better. You didn't know. I should have. They stood in silence. The fire popped. Somewhere above, a child murmured in sleep. What do we do now? Jesse asked. You can see the numbers, but seeing and proving are different things. Crawford owns this town. The sheriff, the judge, half the merchants. His word against mine won't go well for me. Clara thought of Samuel. Of the months he'd spent sick, the bills that piled up, the way Crawford had stood at the funeral with that sympathetic smile that never reached his eyes. The way he'd offered to help her if she was willing to be reasonable. She'd refused. He'd promised she'd regret it. I have documents, Clara said quietly. From my husband's accounts. I kept everything after he died, every piece of paper Crawford's bank ever sent us. I couldn't explain why at the time, it just felt wrong to throw them away. Jesse stared at her. You think Crawford cheated your husband too? I think Crawford's been cheating everyone. I think if we look hard enough, we'll find a pattern. And I think... She took a breath. I think that's why I'm here. Not because you needed a ranch manager. Because you needed someone who could see what you couldn't. And what do you need, Mrs. Whitmore? Clara looked at this man, this stranger who'd taken in a widow and 5 children on faith, who'd offered to sleep in a barn in December so her children could be warm. I need a place for my children to be safe, she said. I need honest work and a roof that doesn't leak. And I need... Her voice caught. I need someone who won't turn us out when things get hard. Jesse was quiet for a long moment. Then he held out his hand. Partners, he said. That's what this is now. You help me fight Crawford. I give your children a home. We either win together or lose together. Agreed. Clara looked at his hand. Calloused, cracked, steady. She took it. Agreed. Morning came too soon. Clara woke on a pallet by the fire. Jessie had insisted, despite her protests to the sound of arguing. You ain't my pa. Tommy's voice sharp with teenage defiance. You can't tell me what to do. Ain't trying to be your pa. Jessie's voice low and even. I'm trying to get you to eat breakfast before your stomach starts growling loud enough to scare the horses. Clara sat up. Tommy stood by the table, arms crossed, face set in stubborn lines. Jessie stood at the stove, holding a pan of something that smelled like eggs. The other children sat frozen watching. Ben's eyes darted between Tommy and Jessie like he was calculating escape routes. Maggie had her arm around Lucy. Will looked like he might cry. Tommy! Clara's voice cut through the tension. Sit down and eat. Mama, this man is the reason we have a roof over our heads. Sit. Down. Tommy's jaw worked. For a moment, Clara thought he might refuse. Then he threw himself into a chair with all the dramatic fury a 13-year-old could muster. Jessie set plates in front of the children without comment. Scrambled eggs, a bit of bread, weak coffee for the older ones, and milk for the younger. There's not much, he said, not quite apologizing. But there'll be more when the supply wagon comes through. It's perfect. Clara met his eyes. Thank you. They ate in awkward silence. Lucy dropped egg on her dress. Will asked if they could go outside and play. Ben pushed food around his plate without eating it. Maggie ate mechanically, watching her mother's face. And Tommy stared at Jessie with a hatred that had nothing to do with the man himself and everything to do with an empty space at every table for the past 8 months. Mr. McAllister, Maggie said suddenly, do you have any animals besides horses? Jessie looked at her surprised. Got some chickens, a milk cow. Used to have a dog, but she passed last spring. Could I help with the chickens? I used to help Mama with ours before. Before we had to sell them, before everything fell apart. The unspoken words hung in the air. I'd appreciate that, Jessie said. Chickens have been making their own rules lately. Could use someone to remind them they've got a job to do. Maggie almost smiled. It was the closest Clara had seen her come to happy in months. Can I see the horses? Ben asked, his voice small but hopeful. I'm good with animals. I don't scare them. After breakfast, I'll take you myself. Me too. Will bounced in his seat. Can I come too? If your mama says yes. All eyes turned to Clara. She felt the weight of it, the children waiting to see if she'd trust this stranger with them. The first test of their fragile partnership. After breakfast, she said. And you stay where Mr. McAllister can see you. Will whooped. Ben's shoulders relaxed. Maggie's almost smile grew a fraction larger. Only Tommy stayed silent, stabbing his eggs like they'd personally offended him. Clara would deal with that later. Right now, she had work to do. The day unfolded in pieces. Jessie took the children to the barn, even Tommy, who went with sullen reluctance. Clara stayed behind, spreading the financial documents across the table, again searching for patterns. Silas Crawford had been careful. The false charges were small enough to seem plausible, large enough to matter. A few dollars here, a few there, interest rates that crept up without explanation, fees for services never rendered. But there was a pattern. There was always a pattern. By midday, Clara had found it. The highest fees always came in winter, when ranchers were most desperate, when they had the least money to spare and the most to lose. Crawford waited until people were vulnerable, then squeezed. Samuel had died in February. The bills had started piling up in January. Clara closed her eyes and let herself feel the anger. Just for a moment. Just enough to remember why she was doing this. Then she opened them and went back to work. Hey, found something. Jesse stood in the doorway, snow on his shoulders, children trailing behind him. Ben's cheeks were red from cold. Will was chattering about horses. Even Tommy looked slightly less murderous. I found a pattern. Clara gestured to the papers. Crawford targets people at their weakest. The charges spike every winter when ranchers are desperate. He's not just cheating you, he's cheating everyone. Jesse crossed to the table, looked at her notes. Can you prove it? Not with just your records. But if there are others, other ranchers, other families who've been foreclosed on their papers might show the same pattern. Most folks who lose their land don't stick around to complain. Then we find the ones who did. There must be someone. A widow, a family that stayed in town, someone who kept their documents like I did. Jesse was quiet for a moment. Then, Ruth Baker, who, widow, lives on the edge of town. Her husband lost their ranch to Crawford 3 years ago. Died of a heart attack a month later. Ruth always said something wasn't right, but no one would listen to her. He hesitated. Folks think she's bitter, crazy, won't shut up about Crawford stealing her land. Clara smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Then she sounds exactly like the person I need to meet. That night, after the children were asleep, Clara and Jesse sat by the fire and planned. Ruth Baker, first, Clara said. If she has documents, we compare them to yours. Find the same pattern, same fake fees. Then we look for others. That'll take time. We've got 15 days. 13 now. I know. Clara stared into the flames. But if we try to fight Crawford without proof, he'll bury us. We need evidence, witnesses, enough to make noise he can't silence. And if we can't get enough in time... Clara didn't answer. She didn't have one. The fire crackled. Wind howled outside. Somewhere in the loft, Lucy cried out in her sleep, and Maggie's voice murmured comfort. Why'd you really come here, Mrs. Whitmore? Clara looked at Jesse. He was watching her with those shadowed eyes, seeing more than she wanted him to see. I told you. The advertisement. You could have answered 100 advertisements, safer ones, easier ones. Why this one? Clara was quiet for a long moment. Then, because it said family welcome. Because every other option wanted me to leave my children behind. And because... She stopped. Because what? Because I'm tired of running. The words came out rougher than she intended. I've been running since Samuel died. Running from creditors, from landlords, from men who think a widow's an easy target. I'm tired. My children are tired. I wanted a place to stop running, to stand and fight. Jesse nodded slowly. I've been running too. Running from what I saw in the war. From the man I was supposed to become. From everything my parents built that I let fall apart. He looked at her. Maybe this is where we both stop. Maybe. The fire burned low. Outside, the Kansas wind howled across frozen prairie. 13 days until Christmas. 13 days until everything fell apart, or something new began. Clara Whitmore had bet everything on a stranger's advertisement. On 2 words in a newspaper. On the desperate hope that somewhere out there was a place where her children could be safe. Now she was going to fight to keep it. God help anyone who stood in her way. Dutch. Ruth Baker lived in a weathered shack at the edge of Millbrook, the kind of place respectable folks pretended not to see. Clara found it on the second morning following Jesse's directions through streets that grew narrower and meaner the further she walked from the main road. She'd left the children at the ranch with Jesse. Tommy had protested, of course. He protested everything now. But Clara had looked him in the eye and said, I need you to watch your brothers and sisters. Can you do that, or do I need to find someone who can... Tommy had gone quiet. Then he'd nodded once sharp and turned away. Small victories. Clara would take them where she could. The shack's door hung crooked on its hinges. Clara knocked twice, then stepped back and waited. A voice came from inside, cracked and suspicious. Who's there? My name is Clara Whitmore. I'm looking for Ruth Baker. Don't know any Clara Whitmore? Go away. I'm staying at the McAllister Ranch. Jesse McAllister sent me. A long pause. Then the door creaked open an inch, and a single eye peered out through the gap. Gray hair, weathered skin, the kind of sharp gaze that had seen too much and trusted too little. McAllister's place is about to go under, Ruth said. Same as mine did. Same as everyone's does when Crawford decides he wants their land. Why should I talk to you? Clara reached into her coat and pulled out a sheaf of papers. Because I think I can prove Crawford's been cheating people. And I think you kept your documents same as I kept mine. The eye studied her, studied the papers. Then the door swung wider. Get inside, Ruth said, before someone sees you. The shack was small and cluttered, every surface covered with papers and books and the accumulated debris of a life that had collapsed. But Ruth moved through it with purpose, clearing a space at a small table, gesturing for Clara to sit. Show me, Ruth said. Clara spread her papers out. Jesse's ledgers, her own husband's records, the notes she'd made comparing them. Ruth leaned in close, squinting at the numbers. Here, Clara pointed. And here. These fees don't match the original loan agreements. They've been added after the fact. Small amounts spread out over time, but they add up. Ruth was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood abruptly and crossed to a trunk in the corner. She dug through it, pulling out yellowed papers, spreading them across the table beside Clara's. 3 years, Ruth said. Her voice shook. 3 years I've been telling anyone who'd listen that Crawford stole our land. They all said I was crazy. A bitter old woman who couldn't accept her husband's failures. She jabbed a finger at her own documents. Look, same fees, same pattern. Administrative charges that appeared out of nowhere. Interest rates that climbed without explanation. Clara looked. Ruth was right. The same fake charges, the same steady bleeding of money that shouldn't have been owed. How many others? Clara asked quietly. That I know of 4 families in the past 5 years, all foreclosed, all bought up by Crawford for pennies on the dollar. Ruth's hands clenched into fists. My husband worked that land for 20 years. 20 years. And Crawford took it for less than what we paid for the seed one spring. Would the other families talk? Would they have kept their records? Ruth laughed, but there was no humor in it. Most of them are gone. Moved away, couldn't stand the shame of staying. But the Hendersons are still here. They run a laundry now, barely scraping by. Mary Henderson might talk to you. Might. Clara gathered her papers carefully. I need names. Everyone you can remember who lost their land to Crawford. Anyone who might still have documents might be willing to speak up. Speaking up won't do any good. Crawford owns this town. The sheriff's in his pocket. The judge plays cards at his house every Thursday. You think anyone's going to listen to a bunch of broke farmers and widows? Maybe not, Clara said. But there's a town council meeting before Christmas. If we have enough evidence, enough voices, we can at least force them to investigate. Delay the foreclosure until someone looks at the books. Ruth stared at her. You really think that'll work? I think it's the only chance we have. Ruth was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. Mary Henderson, the laundry on 2nd Street. Tell her Ruth sent you. Tell her. Ruth's voice cracked. Tell her it's time to stop being afraid. Clara stood, tucking the papers back into her coat. Thank you, Mrs. Baker. Don't thank me yet. Crawford's not a man who takes kindly to people poking around in his business. You watch yourself, Mrs. Whitmore, and watch those children of yours. The warning followed Clara out into the cold. Back at the ranch, chaos had erupted. Clara heard the shouting before she saw the house. Tommy's voice high and angry. Jesse's voice lower, but no less tense. And underneath it all, Lucy crying. She ran. She found them in the yard. Tommy stood with his fists clenched, face red tears he'd never admit to streaming down his cheeks. Jesse stood a few feet away, hands raised, palms out, the universal gesture of a man trying not to make things worse. Between them, Ben knelt in the dirt, holding something small and still. "What happened?" Clara demanded. Everyone started talking at once. Tommy pointing at Jesse accusing. Jesse trying to explain. Will crying that it wasn't anyone's fault. Maggie holding Lucy looking terrified. "Enough." Clara's voice cut through the noise. "Benjamin, tell me." Ben looked up. His face was streaked with tears, but his voice was steady. "It was a bird mama. A little bird. It fell out of its nest. I found it this morning and I was trying to keep it warm, but—" His voice broke. "It died. It just died. And Tommy said it was Mr. McAllister's fault because he wouldn't let me bring it inside, but it wasn't Mama. It was already hurt. It was already dying when I found it." Clara looked at Jesse. He met her eyes and she saw the truth there. He'd done nothing wrong. He'd probably tried to help. But Tommy needed someone to blame, and Jesse was the easiest target. "Tommy," Clara said quietly, "walk with me. Mama, now." Tommy's jaw clenched, but he followed her around the side of the house, out of earshot of the others. They walked in silence until Clara stopped and turned to face him. "I know you're angry," she said. "I know you miss your father. I know this isn't what you wanted. You don't know anything. I know what it's like to lose someone you love. I know what it's like to want to hurt something, anything just to make the pain go somewhere besides your own chest." Tommy's face crumpled. For a moment, he wasn't a defiant 13-year-old trying to be a man. He was a little boy who'd lost his father and didn't know how to carry that weight. "He's not, Pa," Tommy whispered. "He'll never be Pa. No one's asking him to be." Clara reached out, touched her son's face. "Mr. McAllister is a man who needed help, same as we needed help. That's all. He's not trying to replace your father. No one could ever replace your father." "Then why are we here? Why are we living in his house, eating his food, acting like what? Like we're trying to survive?" Clara's voice sharpened. "Because we are Thomas, surviving. That's what we do. That's what your father would want us to do." Tommy pulled away from her touch. "Pa would want us to go home. We don't have a home, not anymore. This is the only chance we've got. I hate it here. I know. I hate him. You don't. You just hate what he represents." Clara took a breath. "You hate that we need someone else, that I couldn't do it alone, that your father's not here to fix things." Tommy didn't answer. But his shoulders shook, and Clara saw the tears he was trying to hide. She pulled him into her arms, held him tight the way she'd done when he was small. He resisted for a moment, stiff and proud. Then he broke sobbing into her shoulder, all the grief he'd been carrying pouring out in ugly heaving waves. Clara held him and let him cry. When it was over, when Tommy had gone quiet, and still Clara spoke softly into his hair. "I need your help, Thomas. I can't do this without you. Can you try? Just try to give this place a chance?" A long pause. Then so quiet she almost missed it. "I'll try." "That's my boy." They walked back together. Jesse had disappeared into the barn. Ben sat on the porch still holding the dead bird. Maggie had taken Will and Lucy inside. "We should bury it," Tommy said. He wasn't looking at Ben, but his voice was rough with something that might have been apology. "The bird. We should bury it proper." Ben looked up at his brother. "You think so?" "Yeah. Pa always said everything deserves a proper burial. Even the small things." Clara watched her sons walk together toward the edge of the property, Ben still cradling the small body, Tommy's hand on his brother's shoulder. Something had shifted. Something small, but real. Small victories. That evening, Jesse didn't come in for supper. Clara found him in the barn, mending a harness that probably couldn't be saved. He looked up when she entered, then back down at his work. "Children settled?" he asked. "Eating. I saved you a plate." "Not hungry." Clara sat down on a hay bale across from him. The barn was cold, but the horses gave off warmth, and someone had hung a lantern from a beam. "Tommy apologized to Ben," she said, in his way. Jesse's hands stilled on the leather. "That's good. He didn't mean what he said, about you. He's just hurting. I know." Jesse set down the harness. "I had a brother once. Died in the war. I remember what it felt like wanting to blame someone. Anyone." "You were in the war?" 3 years. Came back different. Not better. Just different." Clara was quiet for a moment. "Samuel, my husband. He didn't fight. He had a bad leg from a childhood accident. They wouldn't take him. He always felt guilty about that. Said he should have been there with the other men. He was lucky. He didn't feel lucky." Jesse looked at her, then really looked. "What was he like? Your husband?" The question caught Clara off guard. No one had asked her that in months. People offered condolences, said they were sorry for her loss, but no one actually wanted to hear about Samuel, about who he was. "He was kind," Clara said slowly. "The kindest man I ever knew. He used to make toys for the children out of scrap wood. Little animals, puzzles, things to make them smile. He'd work all day at his carpentry, come home exhausted, and still spend an hour carving something for Will or Lucy." Sounds like a good man? He was. He was also terrible with money. Clara smiled sadly. Numbers confused him. He'd take on jobs for less than they were worth because he couldn't say no to people in need. "I handled all the books, but even then we barely scraped by." "When he got sick?" She stopped. The memories were still too sharp. "You don't have to tell me," Jessie said. "No. I want to." Clara took a breath. "When he got sick, the bills piled up faster than I could pay them. Crawford offered to help. A loan, he said, to cover the medical expenses. The terms seemed fair. I didn't realize until later that the numbers kept changing. Fees appearing that weren't in the original agreement. Interest climbing for reasons no one could explain. Same as what he did to me. Same as what he's done to everyone." Clara's hands clenched in her lap. "Samuel died owing 3 times what we borrowed. Crawford offered to forgive the debt if I'd sell him our house and workshop. If I'd be reasonable." Jesse's expression darkened. "Reasonable? He never said it outright. He's too careful for that. But I understood. A widow alone, 5 children to feed. How long could I hold out? Eventually I'd have to accept whatever terms he offered. He was patient. He could wait. But you didn't accept. I sold everything we had and ran. Took the children and left in the middle of the night. I thought if we could just get far enough away, start over somewhere new." Clara laughed bitterly. "Instead, I ended up right back where I started. Different ranch, same enemy." Jesse was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood cross to where she sat and did something unexpected. He held out his hand. "Partners," he said again. Same word as before, but it meant something different now. Deeper. Clara took his hand. His grip was warm, rough with calluses. Partners. The next 3 days blurred together. Clara visited Mary Henderson at the laundry, found a woman as angry and broken as Ruth Baker. Mary had documents. More evidence of false charges, phantom fees, interest rates that defied explanation. She talked to old man Garrett, who'd lost his farm 2 years ago and now worked as a handyman for the people who'd bought his land. He didn't have papers, he'd burned them in a fit of rage, but he remembered numbers. Numbers that matched the pattern Clara had found. Slowly, painfully, the evidence accumulated. At the ranch, other things were changing too. Tommy still watched Jesse with suspicion, but the open hostility had faded. When Jesse asked for help mending a fence, Tommy went without argument. When they came back, something unspoken had passed between them. Ben had appointed himself caretaker of the horses. Jesse showed him how to brush them, how to check their hooves, how to read their moods from the way they held their ears. For the first time since Samuel's death, Ben seemed almost happy. Maggie had taken over the chicken coop, bringing in eggs each morning with quiet pride. Will followed her around like a duckling, chattering about everything and nothing. Lucy had stopped crying for her father every night. They were becoming something. Not a family, not yet, but something adjacent to it. Something that might given time grow into something real. 10 days until Christmas. 10 days until the foreclosure. And Clara still didn't have enough. She was organizing papers at the kitchen table when she heard horses outside. Jessie was in the barn. The children were scattered around the property. Clara went to the window and looked out. 3 men on horseback. 2 of them she didn't recognize, rough-looking hired muscle. The third she knew immediately, though she'd never seen him in person. Silas Crawford. He was smaller than she'd imagined. Soft around the middle, dressed too well for a Kansas winter. A gold watch chain glinted at his vest. But his eyes were the cold, calculating eyes of a predator who'd learned to wear sheep's clothing. Clara stepped onto the porch. Crawford looked up at her. His expression flickered surprise, maybe at finding a woman, then settled into something that was almost pleasant. "Mrs. Whitmore, I presume." He didn't dismount. "I heard Jesse McAllister had taken in a widow and her children. Very charitable of him." "Mr. Crawford." Clara kept her voice flat. "Is there something I can help you with?" "Just a social call. I like to check in on the ranchers in my territory. Make sure they're doing well." He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "And from what I hear, Mr. McAllister isn't doing well at all." "We're managing." "Are you? Because my records show that he owes a substantial sum with payment due by Christmas. That's 10 days from now, Mrs. Whitmore. 10 days to come up with money that I don't think he has." Jesse emerged from the barn. He walked slowly, deliberately, putting himself between Crawford and the house. "Crawford." "McAllister." Crawford's smile widened. "I was just telling your guest about the unfortunate matter of your debt. I know what I owe. Do you, I wonder?" Crawford shifted in his saddle. "I'm a reasonable man, McAllister. I've always been reasonable. I could extend your deadline. Give you more time to find the money. All you'd have to do is agree to certain terms." "What terms?" "Sell me the east pasture. 40 acres. Fair price, immediate payment. It would clear enough of your debt to buy you another year." Jesse's hands clenched at his sides. "The east pasture is the best grazing land I've got. Without it, the ranch isn't worth saving." "That's a matter of perspective." Crawford's eyes flicked to Clara, then back to Jesse. "Or perhaps there's something else you could offer. Something of more immediate value." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Clara stepped forward. Her voice was steady, though her heart pounded. "Mr. Crawford, I think you should leave." Crawford's gaze settled on her. "Mrs. Whitmore, you're new here, so I'll forgive your ignorance. This is a business matter between Mr. McAllister and myself. It doesn't concern you. Everything that happens on this property concerns me. I'm the ranch manager." "Manager?" Crawford laughed softly. "Is that what we're calling it?" He leaned forward in his saddle. "I know who you are, Mrs. Whitmore. Samuel Whitmore's widow. The woman who ran out on her debts in the middle of the night. Did you think I wouldn't find out?" Clara's blood ran cold. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you? You owed my bank $400 when you disappeared. That debt doesn't vanish just because you cross state lines." His smile turned sharp. "I'm a patient man, Mrs. Whitmore. I can wait. But eventually everyone pays what they owe." Jessie stepped forward. "She doesn't owe you anything. Those debts were based on false charges, and you know it." Crawford's expression didn't change. "Careful, McAllister. Accusations like that could be considered slander. And in your current position, you can't afford any more enemies. Get off my land." "Your land." Crawford laughed. For 10 more days, maybe. After that, we'll see whose land it really is." He turned his horse and his men followed. But at the edge of the property, he stopped and looked back. "Think about my offer, McAllister. 40 acres for another year of peace. It's the best deal you'll get." His eyes found Clara. "And Mrs. Whitmore, welcome to Millbrook. I hope you'll find your stay educational." They rode away, leaving silence behind. Jesse stood rigid, staring after them. Clara could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands hadn't unclenched. "He knows," she said quietly, "about the false charges. He knows I've been looking into his records." "How?" "Ruth Baker, Mary Henderson. Word travels in a small town." Clara took a breath. "He's trying to scare us, make us back down before we have enough evidence to move against him." "Is it working?" Clara looked at Jesse. At this man who'd taken her in, when she had nothing, who'd given her children a roof and a chance, who was about to lose everything because a rich man had decided to cheat him. "No," she said. "It's not working." Jesse nodded slowly. Some of the tension left his shoulders. "What do we do now?" he asked. Clara thought of Ruth Baker's warning. Crawford's not a man who takes kindly to people poking around in his business. "You watch yourself, Mrs. Whitmore, and watch those children of yours." "We keep digging," Clara said. "We gather every piece of evidence we can find, and when the town council meets, we stand up and tell the truth. And if they don't listen, then we make them listen." The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the frozen ground. 10 days until Christmas. 10 days until Judgment. Clara looked at the ranch, the sagging house, the crooked barn, the miles of broken fences. It wasn't much. It wasn't what she'd dreamed of when she answered that advertisement. But it was a chance. The only chance they had. She wasn't going to let Silas Crawford take it away. That night, Clara sat with her children in the loft and told them the truth. "There's a man," she said. "A bad man. He's trying to take this ranch away from Mr. McAllister, and he's trying to scare us into leaving." Will's eyes went wide. "Are we going to have to run again?" "No, sweetheart. We're not running. Not this time." "What are we going to do?" Maggie asked. Her voice was steady, but Clara could see the fear underneath. "We're going to fight. Mama's going to find proof that this man has been cheating people. And then we're going to make sure everyone knows about it." Tommy was quiet through all of this. Finally, he spoke. "Is that why you've been going into town talking to those people?" "Yes." "Is it dangerous?" Clara hesitated. She'd always tried to protect her children from the worst truths. But they'd been through so much already. They deserved honesty. "It might be," she said. "But I'll be careful. And Mr. McAllister will make sure we're all safe." "Mr. McAllister." Tommy's voice was flat. "You trust him?" Clara looked at her oldest son. At the doubt in his eyes, the same doubt that had been there since the day they arrived. "Yes," she said. "I trust him. Do you—" A long pause. Tommy looked away, then back at her. "I don't know yet," he said finally. "But I'm trying." It was more than Clara had hoped for. Later, after the children were asleep, Clara climbed down from the loft and found Jesse sitting by the fire. He held a tin cup of coffee long gone cold and stared into the flames. "They're scared," Clara said, sitting down across from him. "They should be." Jesse didn't look up. "Crawford doesn't make empty threats. If he said he knows about your investigation, he knows. And he'll do something about it." "Let him try." Jesse's eyes found hers. "You've got 5 children depending on you. This isn't a game." "I know exactly what this is." Clara's voice hardened. "This is what happens when men like Crawford decide they can take whatever they want. My husband is dead because of men like him. My children lost their father, their home, everything they knew. I'm not letting it happen again. Even if it means putting yourself in danger. Especially then." Clara leaned forward. Jesse, listen to me. We have 7 days until the town council meeting. 7 days to gather enough evidence to force them to investigate. If we can do that, if we can get the foreclosure delayed, we have a chance. A real chance. And if we can't, then we lose everything anyway. What's the difference? Jesse was silent for a long moment. The fire crackled and popped. There's something I haven't told you, he said finally. Clara waited. The east pasture Crawford wants to buy. There's a reason he wants it specifically. Jesse set down his cup. A mining company came through 6 months ago. Surveyors. They found something in the hills near the east boundary. Silver, they said. Not enough for a major operation, but enough to be worth something. Clara's breath caught. Crawford knows. I think so. I think that's why he's been pushing so hard. He doesn't just want the ranch, he wants what's under it. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because it doesn't change anything. Even if there's silver, I can't afford to mine it. I can't afford to keep the land long enough to find out if it's worth anything. Jesse's voice was bitter. All it means is that Crawford has more reason to want me gone. Clara's mind raced. Silver. That was the missing piece. That was why Crawford had targeted Jesse so aggressively, why he'd been willing to wait years for the ranch to fail. It changes everything, she said. Don't you see? If Crawford's been cheating people specifically to get land he knows is valuable, that's not just fraud. That's conspiracy. Premeditated theft. Can you prove it? I can try. Clara stood pacing, thinking. The mining surveyors who hired them. I don't know. They just showed up one day, poked around for a week, then left. But someone must have hired them. Someone who knew to look. Clara stopped. What if it was Crawford? What if he knew about the silver before he started targeting your ranch? Jesse frowned. That would mean he's been planning this for years. That every false charge, every inflated fee, every foreclosure in this county has been building toward this moment. Clara's voice rose. That's not just greed, Jesse. That's evil. Jesse looked at her. In the firelight, his face was half shadow, half gold. You really think we can beat him? Clara thought of her children asleep in the loft, of Samuel buried in cold ground 1,000 miles away, of every widow and farmer Crawford had crushed under his heel. I think we have to try, she said. Because if we don't, who will? 7 days until the town council. 7 days to find the truth. Clara was going to find it no matter what it cost. Outside, the wind howled across the frozen prairie, and somewhere in the darkness, Silas Crawford was making plans of his own. The battle had begun. Clara didn't sleep that night. She spread every document across the kitchen table. Jesse's ledgers and Ruth Baker's papers and the notes she'd taken from Mary Henderson and Old Man Garrett. She worked by lamplight, tracing numbers with her finger, muttering calculations under her breath, searching for the pattern that would break Silas Crawford. By dawn, she'd found it. Jesse. She shook him awake where he'd fallen asleep in the chair by the fire. Jesse, wake up. He came alert fast, the way men who'd been to war always did. What is it? The children? The children are fine. Look at this. She pulled him to the table, pointed at the papers she'd arranged in careful rows. Crawford didn't just add false fees. He timed them. Every single one of these charges appeared within 2 weeks of a payment deadline. He waited until people were already stretched thin, then added just enough to push them over the edge. Jesse studied the papers, frowning. That could be coincidence. Once is coincidence. Twice is suspicious. 7 times across 4 different families. Clara shook her head. That's a system. He's not just cheating people, he's hunting them, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Can you prove the timing in front of a council? I can show them the dates. The pattern is there for anyone who wants to see it. Clara gathered the papers. But I need one more thing. I need to see Crawford's original loan agreements, the ones with the actual terms before he started adding charges. Those would be at the bank. Or at Aldous Finch's office. He's Crawford's lawyer. Ruth said he handles all the foreclosure paperwork. Jesse's expression darkened. Finch won't help you. He's in Crawford's pocket. He doesn't have to help me. He just has to make a mistake. Clara was already reaching for her coat. I'm going into town. Clara. Jesse caught her arm. Not hard, just enough to make her stop. Crawford threatened you yesterday. Threatened us. You walk into Finch's office asking questions, word will get back to him within the hour. I know. And you're going anyway. Clara looked at him. At this man who'd taken her in, who'd trusted her with his ranch and his hopes and his last desperate chance at survival. My husband spent the last months of his life being afraid, she said quietly. Afraid of the debt, afraid of Crawford, afraid of what would happen to us after he was gone. That fear ate him up from the inside. I watched it happen, and I couldn't stop it. She pulled her arm free gently. I'm done being afraid, Jesse. Crawford can threaten all he wants. I'm going to find the truth, and then I'm going to make him choke on it. She left before he could argue. The law office of Aldous Finch occupied a narrow building between the general store and the land registry office. Clara pushed through the door without knocking. Finch looked up from his desk, startled. He was a small man, balding with the soft hands of someone who'd never done a day's physical labor. His eyes flickered with recognition, then wariness. Mrs. Whitmore, I don't believe we have an appointment. We don't. Clara closed the door behind her. I have questions about the McAllister foreclosure. That matter is between Mr. McAllister and Crawford Trust and Savings. I'm merely the legal representative. Then you should be able to answer some simple questions. Clara sat down in the chair across from his desk uninvited. I'd like to see the original loan agreement, the one Jesse McAllister signed when he first borrowed from Crawford's bank. Finch's face went carefully blank. I'm afraid that's confidential information. Is it strange because I have a copy of the current debt statement and the terms don't match what Mr. McAllister remembers agreeing to? Mr. McAllister is mistaken. Is he, or is someone at Crawford Trust adding charges that weren't in the original contract? Finch stood abruptly. I think you should leave, Mrs. Whitmore. I think you should answer my question. I don't have to answer anything. You're not a party to this transaction. You have no legal standing to demand documents. Clara stood too, leaning forward across the desk. You're right. I don't have legal standing. But I have something better. I have evidence that Crawford's bank has been systematically defrauding ranchers across this county. I have dates, amounts, and witnesses, and I'm prepared to present all of it at the town council meeting. Finch's face went pale. You're bluffing. Am I? Clara smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Ruth Baker, Mary Henderson, the Garrett family. 4 foreclosures in 5 years, all with the same pattern of unexplained fees. How many more do you think I'll find if I keep looking? Those foreclosures were perfectly legal. Legal isn't the same as honest, and when the council starts asking questions when they start looking at Crawford's books, what do you think they'll find? Finch's hands were shaking. He clasped them together to hide it. Mr. Crawford is a respected member of this community. The council won't. The council will do whatever protects their own interests, and right now their interests are tied to Crawford's. But that could change, couldn't it, if people start talking, if the truth comes out? Clara leaned closer. You're a smart man, Mr. Finch, smart enough to know when a ship is sinking. The question is, do you want to go down with it? A long silence stretched between them. Then Finch sat back down heavily, like all the air had gone out of him. What do you want? He asked quietly. The original loan agreements. All of them. Every rancher Crawford has foreclosed on in the past 5 years. I can't give you those. Can't or won't. Finch's eyes darted to the window, then back to Clara. You don't understand what you're dealing with. Crawford isn't just a banker. He has connections, power, people who cross him. He trailed off. People who cross him what disappear have accidents. Clara's voice hardened. My husband is already dead, Mr. Finch. My children have already lost everything. What else can Crawford take from me? Finch didn't answer. Clara straightened, smoothing her skirt. I'll be at the council meeting, with or without those documents. The truth is coming out either way. The only question is whether you want to be standing on the right side when it does. She walked out without looking back. The ride back to the ranch took longer than it should have. Clara's hands wouldn't stop shaking on the reins. The confrontation with Finch had taken more out of her than she wanted to admit. But she'd planted a seed. She'd seen the fear in Finch's eyes. Now she just had to hope it would grow. She found Jesse and Tommy in the barn, working on one of the horse stalls. They stood side by side, Tommy holding a board steady, while Jesse hammered nails into place. Neither of them was talking, but the silence felt different than before. Less hostile, more companionable. Clara watched from the doorway, unwilling to interrupt. Hold it higher, Jesse said. That's it. Steady. The hammer came down once, twice, 3 times. The board held firm. Not bad. Jesse stepped back, examining their work. You've done this before. Pa used to let me help sometimes. Tommy's voice was rough. Before he got sick. He teach you how to use a hammer. Yeah. Jesse nodded. Good teacher. Your grip's solid. Most boys your age don't know how to hold a tool proper. Tommy didn't say anything, but Clara saw his shoulders straighten slightly. Pride, she realized. Jesse had just given him something he'd been hungry for without knowing it. Acknowledgement. Recognition. The sense that someone saw him as more than just a boy. Clara. Jesse had spotted her. You're back early. How'd it go with Finch? He wouldn't give me the documents, but I scared him. I could see it. Scared men are dangerous. So are desperate women. Clara came into the barn, nodding at Tommy. You two are making progress. Tommy's got good hands, strong worker. Jesse set down the hammer. Figured we might as well fix what we can while we're waiting to find out if we'll lose the place. Tommy looked at Jesse, then at his mother. Something complicated moved across his face. I'm gonna go check on Ben, he said. He's been with the horses all morning. He left without waiting for a response. Clara watched him go. That's the longest I've seen him go without glaring at you. We had a talk. While you were gone. What kind of talk? Jesse leaned against the stall door. He asked me if I was going to marry you. Clara's breath caught. What did you tell him? Told him I didn't know. Told him that wasn't why you were here, and it wasn't why I asked you to come. Told him that whatever happens between you and me, it won't change what happens to him and his brothers and sisters. And what did he say? Nothing. But he stopped looking at me like he wanted to put a pitchfork through my chest, so I figure that's progress. Clara almost laughed. That's Tommy's version of acceptance. Figured as much. They stood in silence for a moment. The horses shifted in their stalls. Somewhere outside, Will's laughter rang out high and bright. Jesse, Clara said quietly, what is happening between you and me? He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was careful. I don't know. Do you? No. She looked at him, at this man who'd become her partner in 6 short days. But I know I'm grateful you didn't turn us away. When you saw 5 children instead of 2, you could have sent us back. You didn't. Couldn't. Why not? Jesse was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, My mama used to tell me that the measure of a man isn't what he does when things are easy. It's what he does when things are hard. When I saw you standing there with those children, all of you looking like you'd been through hell and back, I knew what the easy thing would be. Send you away. Find someone without baggage. He shook his head. I've done too many easy things in my life. Taken too many shortcuts. Maybe that's why I'm here about to lose everything. So when you showed up, I thought maybe this is my chance. To do the hard thing for once. The right thing. Clara didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. They stood in the barn, two broken people in a broken place, and for a moment the silence felt like something sacred. Then Ben came running in breathless and wild-eyed. "Mama, Mr. McAllister, come quick." Clara's heart stopped. "What is it? Is someone hurt?" "It's one of the horses. She's down in the pasture, and she won't get up, and I think something's wrong with her leg, and—" Jessie was already moving. Clara followed Ben, leading the way across the frozen ground to where a chestnut mare lay on her side near the fence line. Jessie knelt beside her, hands moving quickly over her body. The horse whinnied, tried to lift her head, then fell back. "Easy, girl. Easy." Jessie's voice was soft calm. "Let me see." He examined her front leg and his face went grim. "What is it?" Ben's voice trembled. "Is she gonna die?" "Her legs hurt. Might be broken, might be something else. I need to look closer." Jessie glanced at Ben. "Can you help me? I need someone to keep her calm while I work." Ben's eyes went wide. "Me? You said you're good with animals. Prove it." Something shifted in Ben's face. Fear, yes. But underneath it, something else. Determination. He knelt by the horse's head, placing his small hands on her neck. "It's okay," he whispered. "It's okay. We're going to help you." Jessie worked quickly, feeling along the leg, checking for breaks. Clara watched helpless as her son comforted an animal twice his size. "Not broken," Jessie said finally. "Looks like she caught it in a gopher hole. Twisted it bad, but it should heal if we can get her up and moving." "How do we do that?" "Slowly. Carefully." Jessie looked at Ben. "Keep talking to her. Let her know she's safe." Ben nodded, his face pale but set. It took 20 minutes. 20 minutes of coaxing, encouraging, pushing, and pulling. But finally the mare struggled to her feet, favoring her injured leg, but standing. Ben let out a breath he'd been holding for what seemed like forever. "She's okay," he whispered. "She's really okay. Thanks to you." Jessie put his hand on Ben's shoulder. "You kept her calm. If she'd panicked, she could have hurt herself worse. You did good, son." Son. The word hung in the air. Ben looked up at Jessie with an expression Clara had seen before on Tommy's face, on Will's, on all her children's faces, in the months after Samuel died. The look of a child searching for something lost. "Thank you," Ben said quietly, "for letting me help. Anytime." They walked back to the house together, Ben chattering about horses and injuries, and how he wanted to learn more about animal medicine. Jessie listened, answering questions, offering praise. Clara walked behind them, watching. Something was growing here. Something she hadn't expected. Something that scared her and filled her with hope in equal measure. Family. That night, Maggie didn't come down for supper. Clara found her in the loft, curled under blankets, her face flushed and her breathing shallow. "Maggie." Clara touched her daughter's forehead, burning hot. "Maggie, sweetheart, can you hear me?" "Mama." Maggie's voice was thin, reedy. "I don't feel good." Clara's heart turned to ice. She'd seen this before. The fever, the labored breathing, the glazed eyes. She'd watched Samuel slip away one breath at a time. Not again. Please, God, not again. "Jessie." Her voice cracked. "Jessie, I need help." He came running, took one look at Maggie, and his face went pale. "How long has she been like this?" "I don't know. She was fine this morning. I thought she was fine." "I'll ride for the doctor." Jessie was already heading for the door. "Keep her warm. Try to get her to drink something." "Jessie." He stopped. "Hurry, please." He was gone before she finished the word. The next hours were the longest of Clara's life. She sat with Maggie, bathing her forehead with cool cloths, trying to get water between her cracked lips. Tommy kept the other children downstairs, answering their questions with lies that Clara could hear through the thin floor. "Maggie's just tired. She'll be fine. Go to sleep." But Clara could hear the fear in his voice. Tommy knew. He remembered what had happened to his father. When the door finally opened and Jessie came in with Dr. Keating, Clara nearly collapsed with relief. The doctor was an older man, gray-haired and kind-eyed, with the gentle hands of someone who'd spent decades caring for the sick. He examined Maggie thoroughly, listening to her chest, checking her pulse, asking Clara questions about when the symptoms had started. "Pneumonia," he said finally. "I've seen a lot of it this winter. The cold's been hard on folks. Can you help her?" "I can try." He opened his bag, began pulling out medicines. "She's young and strong. That's in her favor. But I won't lie to you, Mrs. Whitmore. The next few days will be critical." Clara's hands shook. "Whatever it takes. Whatever it costs." The doctor looked at her with compassion. "I know you're staying at the McAllister place. I know the situation there. We can work out payment later. Right now, let's focus on your girl." He stayed for an hour, showing Clara how to administer the medicine, what signs to watch for, when to call him back. By the time he left, Maggie was sleeping, her breathing a little easier. But Clara didn't sleep. She sat beside her daughter all night, watching her chest rise and fall, praying with every breath that the next one would come. Jesse stayed with her. He didn't say much, didn't try to offer empty comfort. He just sat in the corner, keeping the fire going, bringing Clara water she didn't drink being there. Around midnight, Clara's voice broke the silence. "I can't lose her." Jesse looked up. "I've lost so much already. My husband, my home, everything I thought my life would be." Clara's voice cracked. "But my children, they're all I have left. They're the only reason I get up in the morning. If I lose one of them—" She couldn't finish. Jesse moved then, crossing the small space to kneel beside her. He didn't touch her, didn't presume. Just knelt there close enough that she could feel his warmth. "You won't lose her," he said quietly. "She's a fighter, like her mama." "You don't know that." "No, but I believe it." He paused. "And sometimes believing is all we've got." Clara looked at him. At this man who'd been a stranger a week ago, who was now somehow essential to her survival. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "Why do you care what happens to us?" Jesse was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Because I spent too many years not caring about anything. After the war, after my parents died, I shut down. Stopped feeling. Figured it was easier that way." He looked at Maggie, small and fragile under the blankets. "Then you showed up with 5 children who'd lost everything, and you were still fighting, still hoping. And I thought maybe I could learn something from that. Maybe I could remember what it felt like to have something worth fighting for." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "We're going to win this," Jesse said. "We're going to save Maggie, and we're going to beat Crawford, and we're going to build something here. Something real. I don't know how yet, but I believe it. Do you?" Clara looked at her daughter, at the man kneeling beside her, at the life she'd stumbled into by accident and was now desperate to keep. "I want to believe it," she whispered. "Then that's enough. For now, that's enough." They sat together in the darkness, 2 people holding on to hope like a rope in a storm. And outside, the Kansas wind howled on. 3 days. 3 days of fever and fear and prayers that felt like they were going nowhere. 3 days of Clara barely sleeping, barely eating, watching her daughter slip further and further away. Then, on the morning of the 4th day, a stranger appeared at the ranch. Clara heard the knock and ignored it. Let Jesse deal with it. She couldn't leave Maggie's side. But Jesse came up to the loft, his face strange. "There's someone here. Says he can help." "I don't need help. I need the fever to break." "Clara." Jesse's voice was gentle but firm. "Come see." She followed him down, too exhausted to argue. A man stood in the doorway, Chinese with weathered skin and calm eyes, wearing clothes that had seen better days. He held a small bag in his hands. "Mrs. Whitmore." His English was careful accented. "My name is Li Ming. I hear your daughter is sick." "How did you know that?" "Small town. Word travels. He lifted the bag. I have medicine. Different from what your doctor gives, but effective. I have seen it work many times. Clara's first instinct was to refuse. What did this stranger know about treating pneumonia? What if his medicine made things worse? But then she looked at him. Really looked. At the quiet confidence in his eyes. At the way he held himself like a man who'd seen death before and knew how to face it. How did you end up in Millbrook? She asked. I worked on the railroad. They let me go when the line was finished. Mr. McAllister, he let me sleep in his barn sometimes. Gave me food when he had it to spare. Li Ming's eyes went to Jesse. He is a good man. I want to help. Clara looked at Jesse. He nodded slowly. Let him try, Jesse said. What have we got to lose? Everything, Clara thought. I could lose everything. But Maggie was dying. The doctor's medicine wasn't working, and this man had come unbidden offering hope. Show me, she said. Li Ming's medicine smelled strange and tasted worse. Maggie whimpered when Clara spooned it between her lips. But she swallowed, and within an hour her breathing had eased. How? Clara stared at Li Ming. What is this? Herbs, roots. Things my grandmother taught me, and her grandmother taught her. Western medicine is good, but sometimes the old ways work better. By the next morning, Maggie's fever had broken. She opened her eyes, looked at Clara, and said, Mama, I'm hungry. Clara burst into tears. She held her daughter and cried, all the fear and exhaustion of the past days pouring out of her in ugly, heaving sobs. Maggie patted her back, confused and a little frightened. Mama, why are you crying? Did something bad happen? No, sweetheart. Something good happened. Clara pulled back, wiping her eyes. You came back to me. Downstairs, she found Li Ming preparing to leave. Thank you, she said. The words felt insufficient. I don't know how to repay you. No repayment needed. Li Ming shouldered his bag. Mr. McAllister was kind to me when no one else would be. This is how I repay him. Wait. Jesse stepped forward. You don't have anywhere to go. I will find somewhere. Stay here. Li Ming went still. I cannot. People will talk. A Chinese man living on a ranch with a white family? Let them talk. Jesse's voice was firm. You saved Clara's daughter. Far as I'm concerned, that makes you family. And family doesn't get turned out in the middle of winter. Li Ming looked at him for a long moment. Then he bowed a small formal gesture of respect. You honor me, Mr. McAllister. Jesse, and it's not honor, it's common decency. Li Ming stayed. That evening, Pastor Elijah Morse rode up to the ranch. Clara knew him by reputation, the minister at Millbrook's only church, a man Ruth Baker had described as one of the few honest people left in town. But she'd never met him. He was older than she'd expected, with white hair and a weathered face, but his eyes were sharp and kind. Mrs. Whitmore, Mr. McAllister. He shook their hands in turn. I hear you've been making some noise around town. I don't know what you mean, Clara said carefully. Morse smiled. I mean that Silas Crawford has been asking questions about you. Lots of questions. And Aldous Finch looks like he hasn't slept in days. His eyes twinkled. Whatever you're doing, it's working. Has it? Because Crawford still holds the note on this ranch and we're running out of time. That's why I'm here. Morse reached into his coat, pulled out a folded piece of paper. There's a town council meeting the day before Christmas. Regular business mostly. But I've been talking to some of the council members. If you come with your evidence, if you present what you've found, I think they'll listen. Clara's heart leaped. They'll investigate Crawford? I can't promise anything. Crawford has friends on that council. But not everyone is in his pocket. And if you can show them a pattern, show them that he's been cheating people systematically. Morse shrugged. At the very least, they might delay the foreclosure until someone looks at the books. That's all we need. Clara grabbed Morse's hands. Thank you. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Crawford won't take this lying down. He'll fight back. You need to be ready for that. I'm ready. Morse looked at her at the fire in her eyes and nodded slowly. I believe you are Mrs. Whitmore. I believe you are. He left as the sun was setting, and Clara stood on the porch watching him go. 5 days until Christmas. 5 days until the council meeting. She had evidence. She had witnesses. She had a chance. Behind her, the ranch spread out in the fading light. Broken, battered, but still standing. And inside, her children were safe. Her daughter was alive. Her family was together. Clara Whitmore had been running for 8 months. Now, finally, she was ready to fight. The night before the council meeting, Tommy couldn't sleep. Clara heard him moving around in the loft, the creak of floorboards, the rustle of blankets. She waited, listening, wondering if she should go up. But before she could decide, Tommy's feet appeared on the ladder, and he climbed down into the main room. He stopped when he saw her sitting by the fire. Mama, I thought you were asleep. Couldn't. Too much on my mind. Clara patted the chair beside her. Come sit. Tommy hesitated, then crossed the room and sat. The fire crackled between them, casting flickering shadows on the walls. You scared? Clara asked. About tomorrow, no. Tommy's voice was too quick, too defensive. Why would I be scared? Because I am. Tommy looked at her surprised. You... Terrified. I'm about to stand up in front of the whole town and accuse the most powerful man in the county of being a thief and a cheat. If it goes wrong, we lose everything. Again. It won't go wrong. You don't know that. I know you. Tommy's voice softened. You don't lose Mama. Not when it matters. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. When did you get so grown up? Tommy didn't answer. He stared at the fire, his jaw working like he was chewing on words he couldn't quite spit out. There's something I need to tell you, he said finally. Clara waited. I've been angry. At you. At Mr. McAllister. At everyone. Tommy's hands clenched in his lap. Ever since Pa died, I've been so angry I can't think straight sometimes. And I've been taking it out on people who don't deserve it. You're allowed to be angry, Tommy. Not like this. He looked at her, and Clara saw the boy underneath the angry mask, scared, grieving, lost. I've been blaming Mr. McAllister for things that aren't his fault, treating him like he's trying to take Pa's place. But he's not. He's just trying to help us. I see that now. What changed? Tommy was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, We were working on the fence yesterday, me and him, and he started telling me about the war, about the things he saw, the friends he lost. Tommy's voice dropped. He said he used to wake up every night screaming, and there was nothing that could make it stop. He said the only thing that helped was finding something to live for, something bigger than the nightmares. Clara's heart ached. What did you say? I asked him what he found. What was bigger than the nightmares? Tommy swallowed hard. He said he hadn't found it yet, but he was starting to think maybe it was us. The fire popped. Outside, the wind howled. Mama, Tommy whispered, I don't want to lose anyone else. I know that sounds childish, but I can't help it. Pa's gone and Maggie almost died and everything feels like it's falling apart. And I don't know how to make it stop. Clara reached over and pulled her son into her arms. He resisted for a moment, 13 years old, too old for hugs, then collapsed against her, shaking. I can't promise you won't lose anyone else, Clara said softly. That's not a promise anyone can make, but I can promise you this, whatever happens, we face it together. You, me, your brothers and sisters. We're still a family. We'll always be a family. What about Mr. McAllister? Clara hesitated. It was a question she'd been avoiding even in her own mind. I don't know, she said honestly. But I know he's a good man. And I know he cares about us, whatever else happens that's real. Tommy pulled back, wiping his eyes with the heel of his hand. I'm sorry I've been such a problem. You haven't been a problem. You've been grieving. There's a difference. Is there? Yes. Clara touched his face. Your father would be so proud of you, Thomas. The way you've stepped up, taken care of your brothers and sisters. You've done a man's job when you're still just a boy. That's nothing to apologize for. Tommy nodded slowly. Something had loosened in his face, some tension that had been there so long, Clara had stopped noticing it. I should try to sleep, he said. Big day tomorrow. Big day. He stood, then paused. Mama, I hope it works. I hope we get to stay. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. She watched him climb back up to the loft, and for the first time in months, she felt like she'd gotten her son back. Morning came cold and gray. Clara dressed in her best clothes, a simple black dress, worn but clean, the same one she'd worn to Samuel's funeral. She pinned her hair up carefully, checked her reflection in the small mirror by the wash basin. She looked like a widow. She looked like someone who'd been through hell. Good. Let them see it. Jesse was waiting for her downstairs, dressed in clothes she'd never seen before. Clean trousers, a pressed shirt, a jacket that had probably belonged to his father. He'd shaved, trimmed his hair. He looked almost handsome. You clean up well, Clara said. Could say the same about you. They stood there for a moment, awkward in their finery, two people who'd grown used to seeing each other in work clothes and exhaustion. The children, Clara asked. Li Ming's watching them. Tommy's in charge. Jesse smiled slightly. He took it serious. Told the others that anyone who misbehaves answers to him. Good. That's good. Jesse stepped closer. Clara, whatever happens today, I want you to know. Don't. She held up her hand. Don't say anything you might regret. Let's get through this first. Then we can talk about whatever comes next. He nodded slowly. Fair enough. They rode into town together, the wagon rattling over frozen ruts. Neither of them spoke. There was nothing left to say. The town hall was packed. Clara had expected a modest crowd, council members, a few curious townspeople. Instead, she found the room overflowing. Farmers and ranchers stood along the walls. Shopkeepers crowded the doorway. Women she'd never met craned their necks to see. Word had spread. Everyone wanted to watch Silas Crawford face judgment. Crawford himself sat at the front of the room beside the council table. He wore a fine suit, gold watch chain gleaming at his vest, and his face was the picture of calm confidence. Aldous Finch sat beside him, looking like a man who wished he were anywhere else. Clara found Ruth Baker in the crowd, standing near the back with Mary Henderson. They exchanged nods. Silent solidarity. Pastor Morse caught her eye and gestured toward a seat near the front. Clara made her way through the crowd, Jesse close behind, and sat down. The council chairman, a portly man named Horace Wilkins, called the meeting to order. We have several matters of business today, he said, shuffling papers. But I understand there's a citizen who wishes to address the council on an urgent matter. Mrs. Whitmore. Clara stood. Her knees trembled, but her voice was steady. Thank you, Chairman Wilkins. I'm here today to present evidence of fraud. Systematic, deliberate fraud perpetrated against the ranchers and farmers of this county by Crawford Trust and Savings. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Crawford's expression didn't change. That's a serious accusation, Wilkins said. I hope you have evidence to support it. I do. Clara pulled the documents from her bag and approached the council table. These are loan records from 4 different families who were foreclosed on by Crawford's bank in the past 5 years. In each case, you'll see a pattern of unexplained fees and inflated interest rates. Charges that appeared after the original loan agreements were signed. Charges that weren't in the contracts these people agreed to. She spread the papers out on the table. The council members leaned in, examining them. These fees are clearly marked, one of them said. Administrative charges, processing fees. Look at the dates, Clara interrupted. Every single one of these fees was added within 2 weeks of a payment deadline, when the borrowers were already stretched thin, when they had the least ability to fight back. Coincidence, Crawford said smoothly. He hadn't moved from his seat. Banking involves complex timing. Fees are assessed according to schedule, not according to some nefarious plan. 7 times across 4 families, all following the same pattern. Clara turned to face him. That's not coincidence, Mr. Crawford. That's a system. A system of good business practice, perhaps. Crawford's smile didn't waver. Mrs. Whitmore, I understand you have personal grievances. Your late husband owed money to my bank money you chose not to repay, but that doesn't give you the right to slander a respected institution. I'm not slandering anyone. I'm presenting facts. Clara pointed at the documents. These numbers don't lie. Someone at your bank has been systematically cheating people, adding charges that weren't in their original agreements, then foreclosing when they couldn't pay. And you have proof these charges weren't legitimate. I have the testimony of the people who were cheated. I have their original loan agreements which don't match the final debt statements. I have a hearsay, Crawford cut in. Bitter former clients who couldn't manage their finances and need someone to blame. He stood buttoning his jacket. Gentlemen of the council, this woman is a debtor who fled her obligations. Now she's trying to destroy my reputation rather than face her own failures. Clara felt the room shifting. Crawford was good at this, smooth and confident, turning the accusations back on her. She needed something more, something that couldn't be dismissed. Ruth Baker. Clara raised her voice. Would you please come forward? Ruth pushed through the crowd, her face set with grim determination. She carried a folder of her own documents. This woman lost her ranch 3 years ago, Clara said. Her husband died a month later from the stress of losing everything he'd worked for. Mrs. Baker, would you tell the council what you found in your loan records? Ruth's voice shook, but she spoke clearly. Same thing Mrs. Whitmore found. Fees that weren't in our original contract. Interest rates that climbed for no reason. By the time they foreclosed, we owed twice what we'd borrowed, and I still can't explain how. Mrs. Baker is a bitter old woman, Crawford said dismissively. Everyone in this town knows she's been making accusations for years. No one takes her seriously. Maybe they should. Another voice from the crowd. Mary Henderson stepped forward, clutching her own papers. Same thing happened to us. Charges we never agreed to. Fees that appeared out of nowhere. We lost everything. And us. Old man Garrett pushed his way to the front. I don't have papers anymore, burned them in a fit of anger, but I remember the numbers. They didn't add up then, and they don't add up now. More voices joined in. A farmer Clara had never met. A shopkeeper's widow. Person after person stepping forward telling the same story. Charges that weren't in the contracts. Fees that appeared without explanation. Foreclosures that happened just when Crawford needed them to. The council members shifted uncomfortably. Wilkins wiped sweat from his brow. Crawford's smile had finally cracked. This is absurd. These people are conspiring against me. Mrs. Whitmore has organized this whole spectacle to avoid paying her own debts. I've never met most of these people, Clara said quietly. I didn't organize anything. I just asked questions. They came forward on their own because they're tired of being silent. She turned to the council. Gentlemen, I'm not asking you to condemn Silas Crawford today. I'm asking you to investigate. Look at the books. Compare the original loan agreements to the final debt statements. If there's nothing wrong, the investigation will prove it. But if there is something wrong, she paused, then every foreclosure this bank has processed needs to be reviewed, including the one scheduled for Jesse McAllister's ranch on Christmas Day. A long silence fell over the room. Wilkins cleared his throat. The council will need to deliberate. Of course. Clara gathered her documents. Take all the time you need. She returned to her seat. Jesse reached over and squeezed her hand once quick. She didn't look at him. Couldn't. If she saw hope in his eyes, she'd fall apart. The council huddled together, whispering. Crawford sat rigid in his chair, Finch murmuring urgently in his ear. The crowd waited tense and silent. After what felt like hours, Wilkins stood. The council has reached a decision. Clara stopped breathing. Given the number of testimonies presented today and the pattern suggested by the documentation, we believe an investigation is warranted. Wilkins glanced at Crawford, then away. Until that investigation is complete, all pending foreclosures by Crawford Trust and Savings will be postponed. Clara's heart soared. Additionally, Wilkins continued, we are requesting that the county auditor review the bank's lending practices with particular attention to the discrepancies raised today. Crawford shot to his feet. This is outrageous. You're destroying a legitimate business based on the accusations of debtors and malcontents. We're conducting an investigation, Mr. Crawford. If you've done nothing wrong, you have nothing to fear. This isn't over. Crawford's voice dropped low, dangerous. None of you have any idea what you've started. He strode out of the room, Finch scurrying behind him. The crowd parted to let him pass, and for a moment his eyes met Clara's. Cold, furious, promising retribution. Then he was gone. The room erupted in noised cheers. Congratulations, people reaching to shake Clara's hand. Ruth Baker was crying. Mary Henderson was laughing. Somewhere in the chaos, Pastor Morse appeared, his face wreathed in smiles. You did it, he said. You actually did it. The investigation hasn't happened yet, Clara said. Crawford could still win. He won't. You broke him today. Everyone saw it. The man who's been ruling this town like a king just got humiliated by a widow with 5 children and a pile of papers. Clara looked for Jesse in the crowd, found him standing by the door watching her. He wasn't smiling. His face was serious, thoughtful. But his eyes were full of something that made Clara's breath catch. Pride, admiration, and something else she wasn't ready to name. They pushed through the crowd together, accepting handshakes and congratulations. Outside, the cold air hit Clara like a slap, and she suddenly realized she was shaking. You're freezing, Jesse said. Let's get you home. Home. The word felt strange. Right. They rode in silence for a while, the wagon wheels crunching through snow. Then Jesse spoke. What you did in there? I've never seen anything like it. I just told the truth. You did more than that. You gave people hope. People who'd given up, who thought they'd never get justice. He shook his head. Crawford's been running this town for years. No one's ever stood up to him, not like that. Someone had to. It didn't have to be you. Clara looked at him. Yes, it did. He didn't argue, just nodded like he understood something he couldn't put into words. The ranch came into view, and Clara felt something loosen in her chest. Smoke rose from the chimney. A light glowed in the window. Her children were in there waiting. They pulled up to the house, and Clara was halfway out of the wagon when she heard it. Hoofbeats, coming fast. She turned. A rider was approaching from the direction of town, pushing his horse hard. As he got closer, Clara recognized the face. Deputy Marshal Hank Burrows. Jesse stepped in front of Clara, one hand moving to his hip where a gun would be if he'd been wearing one. Burrows reined up his horse, dancing and blowing steam. His face was hard, his eyes cold. Mr. Crawford sends his regards, he said. If Crawford has something to say to me, he can say it himself. Oh, he will, eventually. Burrows smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Right now, he's got other ways of communicating. He pulled something from his coat. A bottle, Clara realized, filled with some kind of liquid. A rag stuffed in the neck. Before Clara could understand what was happening, Burrows struck a match and touched it to the rag. Crawford wanted you to know nobody humiliates him in front of the whole town and gets away with it. He threw the bottle. It arced through the air, trailing flame, and smashed against the side of the barn. Fire exploded across the dry wood. Orange and red, hungry and fast, eating through timber that had stood for 20 years. "No!" Clara screamed. Burroughs wheeled his horse and galloped away into the darkness. Jesse was already running toward the barn, shouting for water for help. Tommy burst out of the house, the other children behind him. Li Ming appeared from somewhere, already carrying buckets. But the fire was spreading too fast, too hot. The flames climbed the walls, reached for the roof, turned the night sky orange. The horses. Clara's heart seized. The horses were still inside. Jesse reached the barn door, pulled it open. Smoke billowed out, thick and black. Clara heard screaming from inside, animals screaming, terrified and desperate. Jesse plunged into the smoke. "Jesse!" Clara ran after him, but Tommy grabbed her arm, held her back. "Mama, you can't! The roof's gonna come down! Jesse's in there! Jesse!" An eternity passed. The flames roared. The children huddled together, crying. Clara fought against Tommy's grip, screaming Jesse's name. Then a figure emerged from the smoke, leading two terrified horses by their halters. Jesse's face, black with soot, coughing and stumbling, but alive. He let the horses go, and they bolted toward the safety of the open field. "Is anyone else in there?" Clara grabbed his arm. "Jesse, is anyone? The chickens." Jesse's voice was raw. "The cow. I couldn't." The barn roof collapsed with a sound like thunder. Sparks exploded upward, a fountain of fire against the black sky. Clara pulled Jesse away as the walls caved in one after another until there was nothing left but flame and ash. They stood there, all of them, watching everything burn. Then Clara heard a sound that stopped her heart. Lucy. Crying. Not the normal crying of a frightened child, but something else, something wrong. She spun around. Maggie stood in the doorway of the house holding Will's hand, her face white with terror. But Lucy wasn't with them. "Where's Lucy?" Clara's voice cracked. "Maggie, where's your sister?" "She was right behind me. I thought she was right behind me. But when I turned around, Clara was already running. Not toward the house, toward the burning barn. Because Lucy was 3 years old, and she loved the baby chicks, and she'd been asking about them all day, and... "Lucy, Lucy!" Li Ming caught her before she could reach the flames. "Mrs. Whitmore, stop, you cannot..." "My daughter is in there." "No." Li Ming pointed toward the edge of the property where the old storage shed stood. "I see her. I see movement." Clara ran. She found Lucy huddled behind the shed, curled into a ball, a half-burned kitten clutched to her chest. The little girl looked up at her mother with huge, terrified eyes. "Mama, the fire scared Mr. Whiskers. I had to save him." Clara fell to her knees and pulled her daughter into her arms, clutching her so tight, Lucy squeaked in protest. "Don't ever," Clara gasped, ever do that again." "But Mama, Mr. Whiskers, I don't care about the cat. I care about you. Promise me, Lucy. Promise me you'll never run toward danger again." Lucy's lower lip trembled. "I promise." Clara held her for a long time there in the snow and the flickering light of the dying fire. Her daughter was safe. Her children were safe. But the barn was gone. The chickens, the cow, most of their winter supplies. Crawford had taken his revenge, and there was nothing left but ashes. When she finally stood, Jesse was there. His face was streaked with soot and tears. "I'm sorry," he said. His voice broke. "I couldn't save it. I couldn't." "You saved the horses. You saved yourself." Clara reached up and touched his face. "That's enough. That's everything." "He's not going to stop." Jesse's eyes found hers. "Crawford. He'll keep coming until there's nothing left. Then we'll keep fighting until there's nothing left of him." She meant it. Every word. Behind them, the barn smoldered and hissed. Around them, her children gathered close, seeking warmth and safety. And somewhere in the darkness, Silas Crawford was planning his next move. But Clara Whitmore had stopped running. Whatever came next, she would face it standing up. The smoke still hung heavy in the air when the first wagon appeared on the horizon. Clara stood in the yard, Lucy asleep against her shoulder, watching the darkness where the barn used to be. Her eyes burned from smoke and exhaustion. Her heart felt hollow, scraped clean of everything except a dull, throbbing anger. Crawford had won. Even with the investigation, even with the postponed foreclosure, he'd found a way to destroy them. "Mama!" Tommy's voice came from behind her. "Someone's coming." Clara turned. The wagon was closer now, and behind it another. And another. A line of them stretching back toward town, their lanterns bobbing in the darkness like fallen stars. "What in the world?" Jesse stepped up beside her, his face still black with soot. The first wagon pulled into the yard. Clara recognized the driver, Pastor Morse, his white hair wild in the wind. Behind him sat Ruth Baker, and behind her Mary Henderson with her husband. "We saw the fire from town," Morse said, climbing down. Word spread fast. Burroughs was bragging about it in the saloon before the flames even died. "Bragging?" Clara's voice came out harsh. "He burned our barn, he killed our animals, and he was bragging?" He was. Morse's face was grim. But he made a mistake. He bragged in front of Sheriff Dalton's deputy, the honest one, not the one in Crawford's pocket. Burroughs is in a cell right now, and he's singing like a bird. Jesse stiffened. "What's he saying?" "Everything. Crawford paid him to set the fire. Paid him to look the other way on a dozen other things too. Land deals, intimidation threats." Morse put his hand on Jesse's shoulder. "The sheriff's riding out to Crawford's place right now. By morning, Silas Crawford will be in chains." Clara felt her legs go weak. She would have fallen if Jesse hadn't caught her arm. "It's over," she whispered. "Just like that. Not just like that. You did this, Clara. You and Jesse and everyone who stood up today. Crawford got desperate, and desperate men make mistakes." Morse smiled. "Now we've got work to do." He gestured behind him, and Clara finally understood what she was seeing. Wagons filled with lumber, tools, blankets, food. People, dozens of people climbing down from their seats, rolling up their sleeves, ready to work. "What is this?" Jesse's voice was rough. "This is your neighbors," Ruth Baker said, coming forward. "The ones Crawford cheated. The ones who've been too scared to fight back." She looked at Clara. "You gave us our courage back, Mrs. Whitmore. Least we can do is help you rebuild." Clara couldn't speak. Tears streamed down her face, cutting tracks through the soot. Tommy stepped forward, his young face set with determination. "Tell us what to do. We'll work all night if we have to." "That's the plan," Morse said. "Christmas morning this family is going to wake up to a new barn. It won't be fancy, but it'll stand." The next hours blurred together in a frenzy of activity. Men hauled lumber and raised beams. Women organized supplies and prepared food. Children ran errands carrying tools and water and whatever else was needed. Li Ming worked alongside the others, his quiet competence earning nods of respect from men who'd never spoken to a Chinese person before. Clara tried to help, but Ruth Baker pushed her toward the house. "You've done enough. Take your children inside. Get warm. Sleep." "I can't sleep. Not while everyone else is working." "You can, and you will. You're no good to anyone dead on your feet." Ruth's voice softened. "Let us take care of you for once. You've earned it." Clara wanted to argue, but Lucy was heavy in her arms, and her legs were trembling, and suddenly she couldn't remember the last time she'd slept. She let Ruth guide her inside. The children were already there, huddled together on the floor near the fire. Maggie had found blankets from somewhere. Ben was curled up with his head on Tommy's leg. Will was already asleep, thumb in his mouth. Clara lay down among them, Lucy tucked against her chest, and closed her eyes. Outside, hammers rang, and voices called, and the community built something from the ashes. Inside, Clara Whitmore slept without dreams. She woke to sunlight and the smell of cooking food. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The ceiling looked wrong. The sounds were wrong. Then, memory crashed back: the fire, The wagons the night of impossible work. Clara sat up. The children were gone. The house was empty, except for the fire crackling in the hearth, and a pot of something simmering on the stove. She stumbled to the door and opened it, and stopped breathing. Where the burned wreckage of the barn had stood, a new structure rose against the pale morning sky. Not finished, the walls were up, but the roof was only half done but standing. Real. A barn built overnight by people who had every reason to give up and had chosen to hope instead. "Merry Christmas, Mama." Clara spun. Her children stood in a row behind her, still dirty, still exhausted, but smiling. All 5 of them alive and whole and together. "We helped," Will said proudly. "I carried nails." "I organized the food," Maggie added. "Tommy and Ben worked on the frame with Mr. McAllister," Lucy piped up. She was clutching her half-burned kitten, who looked deeply unimpressed by all the activity. "And Mr. Lee made medicine for the people who got tired." Clara gathered them all in her arms, as many as she could hold, and squeezed until they complained. "Best Christmas present I ever got," she whispered. "That's not the present," Tommy said. He was trying to look grown up, but his eyes sparkled with something young and eager. "The present's in the barn. Mr. McAllister said to bring you when you woke up." Clara let her children lead her across the yard. The volunteers had mostly gone back to their own families, their own Christmases, but a few lingered, putting finishing touches on the structure. They nodded at Clara as she passed quiet acknowledgement of something shared. Jesse stood inside the half-finished barn, and he wasn't alone. Sheriff Dalton was there, a tall man with a weathered face and eyes that had seen too much. And beside him, in handcuffs, stood Silas Crawford. Crawford looked smaller than he had yesterday. His fine suit was rumpled, his hair disheveled, his face pale with something Clara had never seen there before. Fear. "Mrs. Whitmore," Sheriff Dalton said, touching his hat. "Mr. McAllister, I wanted you to see this before I took him in." "See what?" Clara asked. "The end." Dalton's voice was grim. "Burroughs talked all night. Names, dates, amounts. Every dirty deal Crawford's made in the past 10 years. The judge has already signed warrants. Crawford's accounts are frozen. His properties are being seized." He looked at Crawford with undisguised contempt. "By the time the lawyers are done, there won't be enough left to buy a cup of coffee." Crawford's eyes found Clara. The fear was still there, but underneath it, something else burned. Hatred. Pure and absolute. "You did this," he said. His voice was ragged. "You destroyed me." Clara stepped forward. She looked at this man who had terrorized a whole county, who had stolen land and livelihoods and hope, who had killed her husband as surely as if he'd put a gun to Samuel's head. "No," she said quietly. "You destroyed yourself. I just made sure everyone could see it." Crawford lunged at her hands, reaching for her throat, but Jesse was faster. He stepped between them, one arm catching Crawford across the chest, shoving him back. "Touch her," Jesse said, his voice deadly calm, "and handcuffs won't be enough to save you." Dalton grabbed Crawford's arm, yanking him toward the door. "Let's go. You've got a cell waiting." Crawford went stumbling, cursing, making threats that meant nothing anymore. At the barn door, he turned back one last time. "This isn't over," he snarled. "I have friends. I have resources. You'll spend the next 20 years thinking about all the people you hurt," Clara interrupted. "And maybe if you're very lucky, you'll learn something from it." She turned away before he could respond. Dalton led Crawford out into the morning light. Clara heard the sound of a wagon pulling away, taking with it the man who had haunted her nightmares for almost a year. Then he was gone. And it was Christmas. Jesse came to stand beside her. They watched through the barn door as the wagon disappeared down the road. "How do you feel?" he asked. Clara considered the question. She expected to feel triumphant, vindicated, maybe even happy. Instead, she felt tired and hollow and strangely sad. "I thought it would feel different," she said. I thought when Crawford was gone, everything would be fixed. But my husband's still dead. My children still lost their father. All those families still lost their land. Clara shook her head. Justice doesn't undo the damage. It just stops more from happening. Jesse was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That's more than most people get." I know it is." Clara took a breath. "I just wish Samuel could have seen it. Seen Crawford finally pay for what he did." "Maybe he did." Jesse's voice was soft. "Maybe he's watching right now. Maybe he's proud of you." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "You believe that?" "I believe that the people we love don't really leave us. They're in our children, in our memories, in the parts of ourselves they helped build." Jesse turned to face her. "Samuel's in your courage, Clara. In your stubbornness. In your refusal to give up. Every time you fight for your family, he's right there with you." Clara couldn't speak. The tears spilled over, running down her cheeks. Jesse reached out and brushed them away with his thumb. His hand was rough, calloused, warm against her skin. "I have something to say," he said. "Something I've been meaning to say for a while. Jesse, let me finish." He took a breath. "When you first came here, I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew I couldn't face losing this place alone. I thought I needed help with the ranch, someone to share the work." He paused, gathering words. "But that's not what happened. You didn't just help with the ranch. You woke me up, made me remember what it felt like to care about something, to fight for something." His eyes held hers. "You brought 5 children into my life, and somehow, without meaning to, they became mine. Tommy's stubbornness, Ben's gentleness, Maggie's strength, Will's laughter, Lucy's joy. I can't imagine this place without them anymore. I can't imagine my life without them." Clara's heart was pounding. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I love you." The words came out rough, unpracticed. "I love your children. I love this broken-down ranch and the family we're building here. I'm not asking you to forget Samuel. I would never ask that. But I'm asking if there might be room in your heart for one more person." Clara stood very still. She thought about Samuel, about the love they'd shared, the life they'd built, the dreams that had died with him. She thought about the year of grief and fear and running, always running. And she thought about Jesse. About the man who'd taken them in when he had nothing. Who'd fought beside her, protected her children, rebuilt his barn with the help of neighbors he'd never expected to have. "I don't know if I can love you the way I loved Samuel," she said finally. "That love was first. It was young and bright and untested. It broke me when I lost it." Jesse nodded slowly, his face falling. "But," Clara continued, "I know I love you differently. I love you the way a person loves after they've been broken and put back together. Carefully, deliberately, with full knowledge of what can be lost." She reached up and touched his face. "That's not less, Jesse. It's just different. And I think if you're willing, we could build something real with it." Jesse's eyes searched hers. "Is that a yes?" "It's a yes. Yes to you. Yes to this place. Yes to whatever comes next." Clara smiled, and it felt like the first real smile in months. "Yes to being a family." Jesse kissed her. It wasn't a perfect kiss. It was awkward and tentative, and tasted like smoke and tears. But it was real. And when they broke apart, both of them were crying. "Gross," said a voice behind them. They turned. Tommy stood in the barn door, his siblings crowded behind him. All 5 children watched with expressions ranging from disgust Tommy to delight Lucy. "You're kissing," Will said accusingly. "Mama, you were kissing." "Yes, I was." Clara held out her arms. "Come here, all of you." They came. Tommy reluctantly, the others eagerly. Jesse knelt down to their level as they surrounded him. "I have a question," he said. "For all of you. And I want honest answers." The children looked at each other, then back at him. Your mama and I want to be a family. A real family. But that means I'd be something like a father to you. Not replacing your pa, no one could ever do that, but being there. Helping. Loving you. Jesse's voice was thick. I need to know if that's something you want. Because if it's not, if it's too soon, or too strange, we can wait. We can figure something else out. A long silence. Clara held her breath. Then Lucy stepped forward. She looked up at Jesse, with her big blue eyes still clutching her singed kitten. Would you be my papa? She asked. My earth papa, like Mama said. Jesse's face crumpled. I'd be honored, Lucy. More than honored. Lucy nodded solemnly. Then she held up the kitten. Mr. Whiskers says okay. Will was next. Can I still call you Mr. McAllister sometimes because Jesse sounds weird? Jesse laughed a wet, broken sound. You can call me whatever you want, son. Maggie stepped forward and hugged Jesse without a word. He held her tight, his eyes squeezed shut. Ben hung back, uncertain. My pa was my best friend, he said quietly. I don't know if I can have another one. You don't have to, Jesse said. I'm not trying to be your pa. I'm just trying to be someone who loves you, someone you can count on. That's all. Ben thought about this. Then he nodded. Okay, I can try that. Everyone looked at Tommy. The oldest boy stood apart from the others, his face unreadable. Clara's heart ached for him for the burden he'd carried, the anger he'd hidden, the grief he'd never fully expressed. Tommy, Jesse said, whatever you're feeling is okay. I know I'm not. Stop. Tommy's voice was rough. He walked forward until he stood directly in front of Jesse. You're not my pa. You'll never be my pa. My pa was the best man I ever knew, and nobody can replace him. Jesse nodded. I understand. But... Tommy's jaw worked. But he would have liked you. He would have been glad someone was taking care of us. Taking care of Mama. His voice broke. So I guess I'm okay with it. If you promise not to leave. If you promise to stay no matter what. Jesse reached out and gripped Tommy's shoulder. I promise. On my life, I promise. Tommy nodded once. Then so quickly, Clara almost missed it, he stepped forward and hugged Jesse. It lasted only a second. Then Tommy pulled back, wiping his eyes, trying to pretend nothing had happened. But something had happened. Something important. They were a family now, broken and mended and imperfect, but real. Christmas dinner was chaos. Li Ming had cooked something with the supplies the neighbors had brought. Clara didn't know what it was, but it was warm and filling, and the children devoured it like they hadn't eaten in weeks. Pastor Morse stopped by with a basket of bread and preserves. Ruth Baker brought a ham that must have cost her a week's wages. Mary Henderson came with her children, and they played in the snow while the adults talked and laughed and cried. Clara sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching her children build a lopsided snowman with the Henderson kids. Jessie sat beside her close enough that their shoulders touched. I never thanked you, she said. For what? For taking a chance on us. For answering my letter when you could have picked someone easier, someone without 5 children and a pile of problems. Jesse shook his head. You're not a problem, Clara. You're the answer to a prayer I didn't know I was praying. That's not very practical. No, it's not. He smiled. But it's true. They sat in comfortable silence watching the children play. Will threw a snowball at Tommy, who retaliated with a much larger one. Maggie was trying to give the snowman a hat made of sticks. Ben stood apart from the others, quiet as always, but smiling. And Lucy was introducing Mr. Whiskers to the Hendersons' dog, which was going about as well as expected. What happens now? Clara asked. The barn's not finished. We have no chickens, no cow. The ranch is still barely holding together. We rebuild, same as we've been doing. Jesse's voice was calm. "The investigation will take time, but Morse says there's a good chance we'll get some of Crawford's assets. Compensation for everything he stole. And if we don't, then we figure it out. Together." He turned to look at her. "That's the difference now, Clara. Whatever comes next, we face it together." Clara leaned against him, let her head rest on his shoulder. "I like the sound of that." "Me too." Evening came soft and cold. The visitors left one by one with promises to return and help finish the barn. Li Ming retreated to the corner of the house he'd claimed as his own, a thin mattress and a stack of medical books Clara had found for him in town. The children settled in the loft exhausted and happy. Clara tucked them in one by one, Lucy first, then Will, then Maggie and Ben. Tommy pretended he was too old for tucking in, but he didn't pull away when she kissed his forehead. "Best Christmas ever," Will murmured, already half asleep. Clara smiled. "Best Christmas ever." She climbed down from the loft to find Jesse waiting by the fire. He held 2 cups of something warm. "Tea," he said. "Li Ming's recipe. He says it helps with sleep." Clara took the cup, wrapped her hands around it. "I don't know if I can sleep. Too much has happened." "Then we'll sit here until you can." They sat together by the fire drinking tea that tasted like herbs and honey and home. The flames danced and crackled. Outside the wind had died down, leaving the night still and silent. "Jesse," Clara said. Thank you. For everything." He didn't answer, just reached over and took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. They sat like that for a long time, watching the fire burn down to embers. Clara thought about the year behind her, the grief and fear and running. The moment she'd seen Jesse's advertisement in the newspaper and decided to take a chance on 2 small words. Family welcome. She'd come here expecting nothing, hoping for shelter, a roof, a chance to stop running. Instead, she'd found a home, a partner, a future she hadn't dared to imagine. It wasn't the life she'd planned. It wasn't the life Samuel had promised her all those years ago when they were young and the world seemed full of possibilities. But it was a life, a real one, built from ashes and stubbornness and love, and it was hers. Spring came slowly to Kansas. The snow melted, revealing brown grass that would soon turn green. The new barn stood solid and strong, finished by neighbors who'd become friends. The horses grew fat on hay purchased with money from Crawford's seized accounts. Clara planted a garden behind the house, tomatoes, beans, squash. Maggie helped her dig the rows, while Will ran between them, getting in the way. Tommy was learning to ride properly now, Jesse teaching him on the patient old mare they'd bought from the Hendersons. Ben had claimed the chicken coop as his domain, coaxing eggs from hens with a gentleness that bordered on magic. And Lucy had decided that Li Ming was her personal property. She followed him everywhere, chattering about everything and nothing, while the quiet man smiled and answered her endless questions with infinite patience. The wedding was small. Pastor Morse performed the ceremony in the front yard with the children as witnesses, and Ruth Baker standing up for Clara. Li Ming stood with Jesse, which raised some eyebrows among the neighbors, but surprised no one who knew the family. Clara wore a simple dress she'd made herself. Jesse wore his father's Sunday suit. They exchanged vows as the sun set over the prairie, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple. "I take you, Clara, to be my wife, to love and honor in sickness and health, for richer or poorer, as long as we both shall live. I take you, Jesse, to be my husband, to love and honor, to stand beside you through whatever comes, today, tomorrow, and always." When they kissed, Will made gagging noises, and Lucy clapped her hands, and Tommy pretended not to smile, and Maggie cried, and Ben hugged his new father for a long, long time. That night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Clara stood on the porch and looked out at the land that was now hers. Not dying anymore. Alive. Growing. Full of possibility. Jesse came to stand beside her, sliding his arm around her waist. "What are you thinking?" he asked. Clara considered the question. She was thinking about Samuel resting in peace 1,000 miles away, about the long road that had brought her here through grief and fear and impossible odds, about the children sleeping inside safe and loved and home. She was thinking about Crawford, rotting in a cell, his empire crumbled to dust, about Ruth Baker and Mary Henderson, and all the families who'd finally found justice, about a community that had learned to fight back. She was thinking about second chances, about endings that became beginnings, about the stubborn, beautiful, impossible persistence of hope. "I'm thinking," Clara said, "that this is exactly where I'm supposed to be." Jessie pulled her closer. "Me too." They stood together in the darkness, looking out at the future they'd built from nothing. Clara Whitmore had come west with 5 children, a single trunk, and $47. She'd expected survival. She'd hoped for safety. What she'd found was something better, something real, something permanent, something worth fighting for. A home, a family, a love strong enough to weather any storm. She smiled and leaned into her husband's warmth. It wasn't a fairy tale. Fairy tales ended with happily ever after, as if happiness were a destination instead of a journey. This was better than a fairy tale. This was life in all its messy, beautiful, heartbreaking glory. And Clara Whitmore McAllister was finally completely exactly where she belonged. This was her home, built from ashes and love, and no one would ever take it from her again.